There's three big problems with the reviews about these guitars. One, many of them simply conclude that the guitar is good because they're sponsored or they're afraid to make the company mad. Or they don't use standardized tones and really explore a variety of excerpts that allows you to really understand where the guitar shines or doesn't. And the last thing is that they lack comparison to their direct competitors. Today we're going to do a deep dive on the Sterling Majesty versus the Sterling Majesty x DiMarzio versus a 2010s Man Majesty, aka Majesty Monarchy, and the 2020-2019 version, which is just called the Majesty. Now, most people sum up the difference between these guitars as well. One has a piezo pickup and the other doesn't. But there's really so much more to it than that. And today I'm going to give you my raw, unfiltered thoughts on the pickups, the tuners, the tuning issues that sometimes people see on these guitars, the bridge, the overall build quality, the neck, the switch height, and every little detail you could possibly think of. At the end, I'll also give you my thoughts on whether you should get a Sterling like this one and upgrade it, or you should just go with the premium option right out of the gate. You probably like playing guitar more than shopping for guitars, so let's hop right in. Now, as always, there's a few quick caveats before we begin. First, let's break down Sterling versus Music Man. This is something that confused me for a really long time because they're both called the Majesty in terms of the guitar model. In a way, the branding doesn't really make it very clear. So, Sterling is a brand owned by Music Man that produces the same body shapes and styles, but the guitars are produced in the Philippines and Indonesia. Music Man is the premium American-made version of all of these guitars. You can think of it like Toyota versus Lexus, with Lexus being the premium brand by Toyota. For this video, I'll be comparing four guitars: the Sterling Majesty, the Sterling Majesty x DiMarzio, the Music Man Majesty Monarchy made from 2014 to 2019, and the Music Man Majesty from 2019 on. I don't have the Sterling Majesty on hand, but one of my students recently got one, and I recorded the sound demos before I moved states. So I own a red Sterling x DiMarzio, a purple Majesty Monarchy, and a silver Majesty 7. So when I'm talking about these different guitars, I'll call the Sterling Majesty just Sterling, and I'm going to call the Music Man Majesties just Majesty. Second, I'm not going to be addressing woods in this video. Yes, tone woods do make a difference, but the difference is small. It's typically so small that the difference can only really be heard in person or when isolating pristine recordings and they're being played back on professional speakers in a quiet listening environment. Both of these guitars use various types of mahogany or top woods depending on the model, and so this just isn't part of my comparison today. Overall, I haven't found that either brand uses super low quality selections of wood. So with that stuff out of the way, let's dive in. Alright, let's start with the tuners. So both the Sterling and the Music Man models feature locking tuners, which are awesome, but here's something that people don't talk about. The locking tuners have varied over the years. On the Sterling, the locking tuners aren't very strongly knurled. They're a little more slippery and hard to get a good grip on. They work perfectly fine, just don't be able to expect to really wrench them down, especially if you've got kind of more sway hands. Now, on my 2023 Majesty, it kind of has the same issue because Schaller changed the type of screw that they used on the locking tuner. And my preference is really for the 2014 to 2019, or really just the earlier version of the Schaller tuner, which has very grippy, knurled screws for the locking tuners. Now, I tried contacting Schaller and seeing if they could get me replacement screws for my 7-string Majesty, but I haven't received a reply. So chances are you're going to need to buy a full set of tuners if you're like, man, I gotta have those super knurled tuners. Otherwise, they all work fine. Just wanted to give you a heads up there. Now, before we talk about the nut material, let's go over the overall setup of these guitars. Any Majesty model has a non-locking nut and a floating bridge, and that means that you can deflect the bridge down as well as up. Now, most guitars that use a floating bridge opt for a locking nut, but not on the Majesty. And really, it's kind of a strange choice. And what will happen is inexperienced players pick up this guitar and they go for some, big whammy dive, and then, they're like, well, the strings are crazy out of tune. And that's only half true. If you do a good job setting up these guitars and you lubricate the nut, or you file out the nut slots, have it professionally done, or if you're very capable yourself, or if you switch to gauge 9 strings like I recently switched to and really love, then those issues go away. And I recently saw a very professional tech here in Scottsdale, and he gave me a trick where if you give the whammy bar a quick flip up, then a lot of times it can resolve the tension that causes those tuning issues. So even if you're playing a Floyd Rose, that little trick, of just doing a quick bend up can set things back right. I think the bottom line is that if you want to play like Eddie Van Halen or Steve Vai, then get an Eddie or a Vai guitar. Because even with a fantastic setup, you're going to need to be constantly doing little things, like pulling this up to compensate for those slight intonation issues that can come up with this guitar. So they don't really make a Majesty with a locking nut, and you can't really realistically install one without very dramatic modification, and none of these bridges feature fine tuners. But there are a handful of other JP models that feature a Floyd Rose and a locking nut that you can find used online. So all that said, I still choose this as my main guitar because there's so much more to love about it. Mainly the neck-through design. If you're not a huge whammy bar user, then I think you're going to be really happy with this guitar. And I want to stress that having a proper setup is so extremely important to these guitars. So please don't be one of those people who buys one, does a big dive, and then sees that it's out of tune and gets all mad because of your own lack of understanding. Please educate yourself on making these adjustments or take it to a pro, because there's lots of people who play these guitars and love them. Now let's talk about the nut material. The nut on the Sterling is your typical plastic nut, which isn't bad, but it's also nothing to write home about. The nut on the Majesty is made of melamine. Now I couldn't find any other material that talked about the specific hardness, so I can't make any additional comments here, but that's what they're made of. The bigger difference here is that the Man Majesty uses what's called a compensating nut, which is designed to improve intonation on lower open chords. I found a great picture that explains this much more quickly than I can do with words, so here's that. On the Man Majesty, there's a common issue where the outline of the nut will break free from the finish. And this is not a crack, so don't freak out if this happens to your guitar or if you see it while shopping for one. In fact, my new 7-string, which I just got like a month ago, that has already happened to it, and I'm not worried about it at all. It hasn't changed a single thing. Next up, let's talk about the bridge, which is one of the big differences between these two guitars. The Man models feature a piezo pickup, which is a powerful tool for creating acoustic sounds. The Sterling features a pretty entry-level floating bridge with all the adjustments that you need to make for a good setup. And there is no piezo pickup, but I found that you can still get pretty decent acoustic sounds by just flipping over to the neck position. The Man has all of the bells and whistles. You can access the piezo pickup by flipping the switch that's up here at the top of the top horn up, and when it's all the way down, you've got the magnetic pickups. When you're in the middle, it's got a blend of the piezo system and the magnetic, and then when you flip it up, it's just the piezo pickup. By the way, there's a company called FU Tone, which offers brass, copper, and titanium tone blocks. This is the part that connects behind the bridge and that the strings actually slot through. Now, Man wouldn't confirm if these are actually compatible with the Majesty bridge, and I haven't seen anyone on the forums try, but FU Tone claims that these can increase sustain and alter tone in a positive way. If you'd like to see me mod my Majesty with one of these tone blocks, hit that subscribe button because I'm planning to do that in a future video. Another big difference I've noticed that is rarely talked about in these reviews is the depth of the whammy dive. The Sterling's bar has a pretty shallow angle that actually limits the depth of the dive, while the Man allows for a much bigger dive. I've heard of people contacting Sterling and getting a replacement bar, but every single Sterling that I've played has had kind of that low tremolo bar issue. Personally, when I feel like I need to make that adjustment, because I don't play this one a whole ton, I use it when I travel, I'll probably just throw the tremolo bar in my shop vise and take a hammer to it. And to round off the bridge comparison, let's talk about the height from the body to the low E string. And this is a measurement that I first pointed out in my How to Hold a Guitar Pick the Right Way video, where I demonstrated how the height of the strings off the body affects the resting extension, aka movement up of the wrist. And if you want to see that video, I'll put a card below this video and in the top left. Fortunately, Sterling measured within just 1 millimeter of my Purple Majesty. Now this isn't a measurement that I want you to freak out about because ultimately it's a ballpark number. That's because the number is going to vary some based on the particular setup of the guitar and also the string gauges. Just know that as far as guitars go in general, it's very low, and I think you'll be very happy if you're looking for a guitar with more wrist relief than most guitars out there on the market. While we're still in the top half of the guitar, I've got some miscellaneous notes. There's a thicker joint at the headstock on this guitar. The second is that the finish of the neck is either satin or gloss, just depending on which guitar finish that you get, and many of the later models tend to have the gloss finish. My Purple Majesty is a satin finish, and the 7-string Majesty is gloss, and this one is also gloss. To me, the neck feels just a little bit bigger on the Sterling, but it's barely enough to feel. The neck radius for the Majesty is quite flat at 17 inches, while this one on the Sterling is at 16 inches. And for reference, a gem has a 15 3/4 radius, and the typical Stratocaster has a 9 1/4 radius with the same scale. So if you're someone who likes playing, big prog chords, a flatter radius is really going to help you out. All right, now let's talk about the pickups, which is probably the single most important difference between all of these guitars. The Sterling guitars have either Sterling branded pickups or DiMarzio pickups, depending on which trim level you buy. The earliest Majesties have Illuminator pickups, while later Majesties have DiMarzio Sonic Ecstasy pickups. The 2019 and above Majesties have Dreamcatcher and Rainmaker pickups. My opinion is that if you can afford it, definitely get the Sterling with the DiMarzio pickups. The Sterling pickups have pretty poor string separation, and I found that the overall tonality is harsh. I've never played the Illuminators before, so I can't speak to those, but with regard to the Sonic Ecstasy pickups, these are extremely high output pickups. I wouldn't describe them as gainy, but others in the community have echoed my same sentiments. And it's that most people find that the Sonic Ecstasy pickups are kind of the primo option for the crunch and rhythm tones, while the Dreamcatcher and Rainmaker combo is really best for the sweet, pure, and articulate sounding solos. The differences with the pickups carry onto the controls and onto the backplate depending on which model you get. As I said before, the Music Man models will have a switch right here at the top of the horn to select between the piezo and the magnetic pickups, while the Sterling just won't have any switch there. It's the bottom controls that I want to focus on now. One last quick note I forgot to put in the script is that some people find that this control can kind of get in the way when they're doing tapping. I don't find it to get in the way a lot, but some people do. On the Sterling, there's a push-push pot for a 12 decibel volume boost. On the Majesty, it's a 20 decibel volume boost right here. And personally, I never use this feature. I know that some people find it really useful, but I just don't find that it changes the sound in a very meaningful way or that it increases the actual perceived output volume. I think that if you're looking for, a boost type effect, you're better off just using a pedal, especially since the push-push is a little more difficult to control and execute precisely versus a foot control. This might be useful for overdriving clean tones, but the boost is so great that it's almost too much, and you can adjust it on the back of the Music Man Majesty. I actually haven't looked at it on this. It doesn't have an obvious control for it, but I just don't find myself using it that much. Another note here is that I also just play through the fractal, and that might be affecting the processing. If you're playing through traditional amp and cab setup, then it might respond a little bit differently. Next up is the tone control. And the tone control on these guitars, they both move very quickly and easily. It doesn't really have that kind of molasses feeling resistance like some aftermarket pots, but it's completely fine. The positioning is excellent, and I never find myself accidentally bumping it. Now, the Majesty, the Music Man Majesty, offers a coil split pot where the Sterling does not. I don't really use it, so take that as you will. Next up is the piezo volume control, which there's just no knob for it. It would be right here. But on the Music Man, that's where that piezo thing is. And so you can, when you switch into the piezo mode or the blend mode, you can just roll that up or down according to the split that you want. Now on the back plate of the Music Man models only, you have the option to adjust the boost amount, piezo treble, piezo bass, and the mag piezo blend when the switch is in the middle position. So it's kind of nice. Now the subtle differences continue on the controls. And that is with the Majesty's controls have a little rubber ring around them, which kind of aids with grip, and the Sterling controls do not. Second, the Sterling controls are really shallow. If you catch the right angle when you pop the boost on, you can actually see the metal from the pot, and you can see how it kind of floats off the body of the guitar. And they're in fact so shallow that there's a little bit of wiggle on them, and it just kind of affects really the perception of the overall build quality and feel of the guitar. Third, I've measured this on multiple Sterlings and multiple Majesties, and the pickup selector control is actually recessed further into the body by about 3 whole millimeters on the Sterlings, which unfortunately makes it more difficult to switch between pickups quickly. And that's a big reason why I tend to pick up my Music Man instead of my Sterling. On the bright side, both of these guitars feature just 3 positions for the pickup selector, which are bridge, bridge and neck, and neck. The switch is positioned so perfectly and it has a great feel. It's very easy to get to the exact position that you want. Now it's time for the sound comparison. And I will be using a Fractal FM3 and recording direct into my interface. The excerpts I've chosen are the acoustic section from A Change of Seasons, the main riff from On the Backs of Angels, and the opening solo from In the Presence of Enemies. I encourage you to listen specifically for the quality of the crunch, the quality of the very front end of the note, the attack, and the string separation. Also listen for the development of the harmonics, which is something that all of these guitars, even the Sterlings, have sort of a special knack for. Now, instead of me rambling on with vague terminology for 5 to 10 minutes, I want you to make your own judgments about the sound. But in my opinion, I'm just going to sum it up for you this way. When it comes to the Sterling pickups, personally, I would avoid them. I think the Sterling X DiMarzio sounds really great, and the Man Majesty with the Sonic Ecstasy also sound great. And if you can get a Man Majesty with the Rainmaker and Dreamcatcher combo, it is just awesome for solo tones. The only one out of these I wouldn't bother with is just the stock Sterling pickups. The pickup upgrade is really worthwhile on any of these guitars. Well, I think it's obvious which one I recommend. If you play one of these guitars, what are your thoughts? Let me know below. And if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons, since it really helps me out. I think I've said my piece, so I'm gonna go ahead and get back to practicing, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.